Hello, welcome back to another episode of School of Self Worth. One of the goals of this podcast is to share the story behind the story from women who have defined success on their own terms. I absolutely would count Danielle Fanfair among them. She's a former pastor turned speaker, Enneagram teacher, and director of integrated well-being who has consulted with NASA, among others. I've been privileged to train under her, and I love tapping into her wisdom whenever I can to understand myself better and also the people that I love. Are you a high achieving woman ready to understand and know yourself at the deepest level? This conversation is for you. All right, everyone, I am so happy here to welcome Danielle Fanfair to School of Self Worth. Welcome, Danielle.
I love the School of Self-Worth. Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
So Danielle and I know each other through a mutual friend who introduced us a couple of years back, and I've really loved our interactions, our collaborations since then. And I'm actually currently taking her Enneagram certification course and learning all about the Enneagram. So that's been a really, really cool journey. And what I'd say I love about you, Danielle, is what you speak to and your way of really dissecting what we're talking about as you're teaching or as you're talking about it, whether it's in, back and forth conversation or in a place where you might be learning from you. So thank you. I love that about you. And I'm so excited to dive into this conversation because really, right before we started, you had mentioned that this has been on your mind. So I'd love for you to even start to go into where did you start to think about self-worth or bring it up for yourself as a topic? And it might even be something where you were aware of it, didn't have that particular verbiage for it, but just we're starting to become aware of it. And I'd love to hear about the beginning of your journey.
Yeah. So in 2016, I had a crisis of faith and identity. And I was a burnout, exhausted pastor of a small, very progressive Christian movement in Houston, Texas. And I loved the work that we were doing and the transformation that we were seeing. However, I was completely out of alignment with myself while I was doing that work. I was over identified in religion. I was over identified in gender roles. And I was over identified in my professional role as a pastor and felt limited by all of it. And up until that point, my self esteem and my concept of my self worth was deeply, deeply, and incorrectly connected to how well I performed at those roles. So, how good of a Christian was I? How often did I avoid like the seven deadly sins, and how much did I live this life that was really connected to putting everybody else first, glamorizing suffering as holiness, and disconnecting completely from my body, my desires, my dreams, and pleasure. So how well did I do that? Because how well I did that was my kind of rubric for whether or not God was pleased with me and whether or not the religious authorities that I had trusted. So how I overrode my own intuition, how I dismissed and completely gaslit my own emotions, and how I ignored my own intellectual development was the way that I was making everybody else happy. Okay. Then in gender roles, being a woman, being ladylike, being this, good girl, how well I did that was a parallel of how well I squelched my own um, deep yearnings and longings and desires, because the desires that I had to, produce and to attract opportunities and to be a leader, right? All of those things that I saw myself doing were completely in opposition to the indoctrination of what it meant to be a ladylike Christian woman, right? And then finally, my role as a pastor. You know, in Houston, I'm in Texas. Houston is a Democratic city. I always say Houston is purple, right? Like we have a lot of progressive political leanings. However, we're still in the red state in the Bible Belt. You know what I'm saying? And so the role of a pastor as a I don't know how many people really understand how much you have to deny yourself to be a good pastor. Like you're the only one. What did Tim call it or Eric? Two of our cohort members said you have to be the non-anxious presence in everybody's life.
Mm.
And so that non-anxious presence looks like you don't have any emotions unless you're happy, unless you have the joy of the Lord, right?
Mhm.
um, but you don't get angry. You don't get sad. You do not get anxious. Be anxious for nothing, right? Is what the scripture says. You don't have bad days. You don't have low moments. You certainly don't have disordered mental health as a pastor. No way. Because you've got Jesus. All you need to do is read a scripture and pray and worship, and you'll be fine, which is, again, how you start to override your own intelligence. And so, a friend of mine named Hannah McMahon gave me the coin. She coined the term and gave it to me. She burnt up. She didn't burn out. She burned up into her what's next. And I did the same thing. I had a baby and I looked down at this perfect little baby girl and I said, hey, I will not pass on to you the same suffering that I am willingly experiencing. And so I decided to radically change my life. Um, and in the process, I went to a doctor. Her name is Dr. Farrell McLean, and she is what's called a bioenergetic pharmacist. And it's a very little known area of science where a bioenergetic doctor will hook you up to a machine and the sensors will use radio frequency to test the energy of different systems in your body, organs and systems, and how your body echoes back the radio frequency, the the degree of intensity to which your body echoes back the intensity is recorded by the machine, and then a bioenergetic doctor is able to say, hey, your kidneys are functioning at a low energy, or your liver is functioning this way, your heart, and can even pre-screen you for growth of harmful substances that can later become like cancerous, right? The machine could not even pick me up. My energy was so low.
Wow.
My energy was so low. She tried everything. She said, the machine is not even reading your body. She said, my friend, you are in crisis. She said, if you continue at the pace and at the rate that you've been going, and other things were happening in my life. I was running out of gas on the freeway. I was bumping and cutting myself around the house. I mean, I was having um, back spasms that rivaled childbirth pains. I had what I thought was a stomach virus and was constantly just in all kinds of turmoil in my digestive system. My entire body, I was having migraines that made me close one eye to be able to see. Um, and when she said that you are in crisis, either you take care of yourself or you're going to end up in the emergency room, all of it together was a huge wake up call. And when I asked her what to do, she said, the only thing that I can prescribe for you that will immediately change your energy is going and doing things that bring you joy. And she gave me some alkaline water and some minerals. She was like, drink these minerals, drink this water, go get in the bed. And when you wake up, go do things that bring you joy. That is the only thing that's going to raise the level of energy in your body. And then come back and we can actually test your organs. She said, right now, your energy is so low that we can't even test what's going on with you. And to be honest, it scared me and it pissed me off because here I am just pouring out, following all the rules that I was given. I would learn people's individual rules, like the little nuanced things that they liked. I was following the laws. I was following the church's rules. I was following all of society's rules around modesty and femininity and all of that stuff. I was following all the rules, and it was exhausting me because at the same time I was following all those rules, I was using my reserve of energy to suppress my own desires and to suppress my own wants and to suppress the things that I liked and was interested in because that was sinful. And so my journey to self worth literally was a last resort before an even deeper health crisis. And when I began to esteem what I naturally liked as worthy of my time, attention, and energy, when I began to esteem those things, I esteem myself, and my life began to change and take shape. And I began to not only cultivate an environment that supported my true self, I began to attract opportunities and attract relationships and attract income that was in alignment with the value that I had and was constantly contributing.
Well, there are so many things I have questions for you about in that whole story,
That's a lot.
Danielle.
That's why I was like, okay, I'm gonna bring it. I'm gonna tie it up with a little bow.
And pause so Nicole can ask a question because I'm so curious. Well, first off, what I really observed from you sharing is that you were locked in a system, and that was
Hmm.
part of the real challenges. And it's interesting because, for me, faith is a really big part of my life, and it was really this church system that had you locked in the pastor system. And it's interesting because I have never been in those systems myself personally, but I've been in other systems like journalism, which also did the same thing and like locked you into this pathway, and there's only one way to go. So first, thank you for sharing that, because I feel like it's illuminating for all of us, for myself personally, and I'm sure for the listeners, around how these systems exist in so many places and in so many ways, and then the cost of it that you
Hmm.
described so well to your health. And that health journey, I know for many people listening, has been present for so many people. Like, you feel it in your body first, like
And
that's the first place it comes
and
out.
I just want to say that the cost of the things that you're doing is so high compared to the benefits of what you're receiving. So there's
Mhm.
always this debt, this internal deficit. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, you weren't even hitting that test. Like, they couldn't even tell what your energy was like. Well, then I was so curious because she said, go do something that brings you joy.
Mhm.
And I wanted to know first what that was.
Yeah. So I went home and went to sleep immediately because my husband and I are always throwing out like ideas for inventions. And he goes, "Do you realize that all your inventions are around sleep?" And I'm like, "Yeah, because I'm tired." So I'm trying to invent ways to go lay down. And so I gave myself the rest that I needed. Um, my daughter is just, she is just a bundle. I mean, a real bundle of joy. She just emanates just fun. She's funny. She's smart. She approaches the world with wonder, curiosity, and just gentle kindness. So spending time with her was one thing that I did. I also took a 40-day sabbatical and went to go stay in LA with my family for 40 days. And my body loves California. Like the more I dig into the history of California and my family history of California, I'm like, oh, this is epigenetic. Like my pores and my mitochondria at the cellular level operates differently in California, right? And so I just started making decisions to skip stuff and say no. And I love to dance. If I wanted to be a professional dancer, I probably could, but I feel like that would take the joy out of it. And so I started dancing more often because, again, my religious indoctrination said, don't you dance. That's suggestive. That's calling too much attention to your body. Your body is a bag of sin, right? And so I started to dance. I started to just engage in intimacy with my husband more often, and not to like please my husband or save my marriage, but because I actually wanted to become intimate in a more frequent and intense way. And I also grew my hair out. I love my hair, and I had a very very low hairstyle for a long time. I had a low haircut, and it was mostly out of convenience and budgetary constrictions. And so I grew my hair out and decided that I loved my hair. I was going to take care of it. Um, I did a bunch of things that I had just been putting off for a long time, and saw that I was able to um, really see myself returning from what felt like a very long journey of like being hidden away. Um,
Mhm.
Additionally, I left the church. I retired from my position, and I also retired from religion in the way that I was practicing it as this dutiful, sacrificial thing. And I entered into a much more expansive spiritual practice that is characterized by hopeful expectation and community with a divine source that means me well, right? Um, that is genderless and even nameless, and maybe even a collection of several spirits that, are working together for my good, right? And so when I slow down my pace and when I change my work, I'm also a lifelong learner. And so I went crazy on certifications and did some professional Enneagram training. I got 2 and 300 hours yoga teacher training certifications. Took a lot of classes. I took the science of well-being at Yale University. The recorded course, of course, I didn't go all the way to Yale, but I took the recorded course with Dr. Julie Santos. I just took a lot of courses around my interest, and began to integrate what I was learning into my curriculum, which is called Confusion to Clarity. And every time I would look up, I was receiving opportunities to come and teach and speak and share. And so the COVID-19 quarantine was a great reset for me. I actually was able to take a year to really develop my curriculum and get the kind of rest that I needed. I was I manifested a layoff from I had moved on from the church and became the executive director of the Hines Center for Spirituality and Prayer. And everything we were doing was in person. It was a lot of breathing. It was very close proximity. And so the board voted unanimously to indefinitely close the doors until we could figure out the pandemic. And that was actually something that I kind of secretly wanted, because a lot of my speaking opportunities and my teaching opportunities and my coaching opportunities were competing with my full-time job. And so, yeah, I was able to fully pivot during the pandemic, and I've been going since then. It's been about, see, that was October of 2016 that all that started happening. I had had my child October of 2015, and so I was a year into motherhood when I had that big crisis. I really think motherhood triggered everything. Postpartum depression actually did me a huge favor, because I could not ignore or deny everything around me that was just completely out of alignment with who I was, um, and who I am being today. Um, so I made that pivot and just started integrating those joyful things. My husband just bought me a pair of skates because I skate every chance I get, and so he's like, "You need your own skates. You need to stop renting these skates." And so they ride around with me in my trunk, so I can skate whenever I want, whenever I spot a safe space to do so. Yeah, so my life is filled with a lot more playfulness, a lot more affection. My friend group has completely transformed, and I'm friends with peers who want to see me do well and who are not intimidated by seeing me in the news or on TV or in a magazine, because that happens, right? And so ended up kind of burning up into an expanded way of living that really matches my energy naturally.
That's beautiful. I love all your ways of playing because I feel like play is such a secret to joy.
Oh
Like
my
you want to
gosh.
get joy, got to get out there and play. Like parents at the playground, I'm like, go hang on those monkey bars with your kids. Like that'll
Yes.
bring you joy, right? Like to start doing all that
Yes.
stuff with them.
Yes. And I learned, I can't remember the study, but it takes 100 times to learn how to do something, like to be able to like figure it out. But if you do it while playing, it only takes 17 times.
What? That is a great
Yeah,
stat.
so
I love
that's
that.
actually how I got through college. Is I just made up songs for everything. So like all my like geographical study, or I had to learn a map. I remember I can't remember the whole song now, but if you put a map of South America in front of me, I can probably remember the song. But I made up a song about all the countries, and the only part I can remember is going Paraguay, Uruguay, because I had to, like, they were right next to each other. And so I taught the song to my other classmates. And so you could see us taking the test, like, like singing the song in our heads to finish the math. So, yeah, so play is really helpful with learning things faster.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, to shift it a little bit, this is something you and I chatted about before we started about defining self worth. And for you,
Mm-hmm.
you had been saying recently you'd been unpacking it from selfishness. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more about that, because I feel like that is something where we start to take care of ourselves or put ourselves ahead of other people. And we start to be like, am I being
Oh my God.
selfish? Do I am feeling guilty for choosing yourself over your kids or your family or other people who might need something from you?
Yeah. So that actually came out of being accused of being selfish by people that I really trusted. And the words I chose myself being thrown at me as some kind of evidence that I was lacking in character. And so I had to know, as I was being accused of being selfish, that the boundaries that I put in place for my well-being and the results that I was seeing about my well-being made it so that I had to define selfishness versus self-worth.
Mm,
Okay?
yeah.
So, and I do this a lot with different concepts as I'm dismantling my internalized patriarchal, white supremacy, Christian narcissism, all of that I've internalized. And so I'm still teasing that apart, right? I'm still teasing apart this idea that there's only one way, right? And this idea that certain words only have one meaning anyway. So with self-worth versus selfishness, self-worth is an intention to esteem yourself adequately in the way that your creator, whomever that is, your source, in the way that your creator has um, communicated to and through you with your intelligent design, right? So my self-worth has me assess my super intelligent design and then make decisions that support the expansion and functioning of that beautiful design. That's self-worth. So self-worth is I'm going to give myself enough sleep. And I'm going to say no to the activities that prevent me from sleeping adequately, right? Because I know that when I go to sleep the next day, I have fewer sinus problems. I'm clearer in my thought. My body's working better. I'm not as sluggish. I can go run my 3 miles or walk my dog or play with my daughter when she gets home from school. You know what I mean? I have enough energy reserves to do that. So my self worth, knowing that 8 hours of sleep is putting my body in a position to perform at its optimal function, and I'm worthy of that, helps me to have time boundaries and say, I'm done. Like if you email me at 8:30, see you tomorrow, right? Because 8:30 is my initial descent into, sleepy time, right? Selfishness is different. Selfishness says, I am going to impose my will. I'm going to impose um, my I'm going to impose what I think I need over everybody else's needs, right? I'm going to literally look and see how me doing what I want to do diminishes and subtracts from everybody else's needs, and I'm not going to figure it out, find a workaround. I'm going to just do what I want to do anyway. I'm not going to take into account the impact that I'm having on others. I'm not going to take responsibility for that impact. I certainly am not going to apologize for that impact. Selfishness says I'm going to do what I want to do regardless of the impact. Those are two different things, because my time boundaries and the way that I create an environment for my sleep takes planning and forethought and usually can become harmonized with everybody else's needs. What that means is I'm going to get your work done. I'm going to get what you need done. I'm going to respond to you and create a plan that allows me to be active in my community before I begin my initial descent. So there's a collaborative energy and a positive intention that comes with self-worth versus selfishness. I don't care what you say or what you do or how it's going to affect you. I'm going to do what I want to do. To me, that's even saying it, that's two different energies. I have two different frequencies in my body when I talk about self-worth versus selfishness. And then self-worth is generative. Selfishness is decaying. Self-worth increases your capacity to be present. Selfishness destroys all your relationships and destroys all your other sources because you're constantly feeding yourself with no regard to how you're affecting your ecosystem. Self-worth is I'm worthy enough to put myself in position to positively contribute to my ecosystem. Selfishness says I'm the ecosystem.
Yeah, I love those definitions. Thank you so much for the thought you've put into that and then laying it out for us, because I always think of that too. Like, self-worth is so important because then that means I take care of myself, but that also means I have more capacity to
Exactly.
contribute. Because if I don't have capacity, how could I contribute? Whereas selfishness is, like you said, it's like a taking energy.
It's a
It's like a give it
taking.
all to me,
I'm
right?
going to take and take and take until there's nothing left to take and nobody else to take from. And so we often see people who are habitually selfish end up in these very isolated um, lifestyles because they've just taken. However, you see the folks who have been mindful about their participation and created this harmony between self-worth and contribution. Those are the people whose lives are continuing to expand and blossom in ways that continue the culture of self-worth that they started.
Yeah, that's beautiful because I feel like a lot of times women, we've been really trained to not prioritize ourselves, I think, for so many reasons, right? And then the idea of starting to take back time for yourself or to sleep, which really, I don't know how anyone could call that selfish, but I think that's, getting sleep and taking time for yourself over everyone else in their own minds, though, can be selfish, right? And that's the next challenge, not only what other people might say, but then what you might feel about that.
Mm-hmm.
And what would you say to people around that? Like, how do you unpack that for yourself?
Yeah, well, I'll share a story. One day, one Sunday, one of the many Sundays that I was working all day, every day in a pastoral role, I started to feel like stomach pains, and they were connected to emotions. I needed to end a relationship that I had been in for a while that was just a cesspool, and my body was starting to respond to me. You see a pattern here with me. My body always tells me when it's time to, you know, burn up into something new. And I told my colleagues, "Hey, y'all, I have to go. My body is talking to me and I need to be somewhere quiet and calm where I can tend to myself." And the response I got was, "You are quitting. You're quitting on us today. You kind of let your teammates down." And my response to that was, if my teammates would rather me be in excruciating pain and stay, then cover me while I go take care of myself for a very physical event that has never happened before, then I'm on the wrong squad. And so the difference, I think, in those two perspectives is that I had done everything that I was supposed to do that day. So literally, me being around was just, sprinkles on top of the icing on top of the cupcake at that point. But B, I had a crucial human need to go meet, and it was completely out of our cultural design. We had no safety net for someone to have a crucial human need and be able to meet it without causing other folks to feel like they had quit. And so I would just look around, at my life and say, are there any spaces in which there's no room for me to need time and space to take care of myself? Because if that is the system that you're in, it's time to start to reevaluate how much your concept of your self-worth is being exchanged. It's a cheap exchange for the way other folks think you're showing up and sacrificing enough.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like it is so helpful to sometimes parceling out this stuff. I know takes a moment, and you and I are both people who are big fans of like how do you like settle your body, your nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
regulate yourself so you can start to discern these things, and then you can look at the situations that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And while it might not always be possible in that moment, upon reflection you can start to say, okay, does this work for me? Does this actually work for me? Or am
Mm-hmm.
I just giving, or is someone taking from me, right? Like that experience, that exchange doesn't feel energetically equitable in whatever way.
Yeah, and like, what are you getting from all of this self-martyring behavior, right? Like, what's the payoff? And be honest about that. Which is why the Enneagram for me has been so helpful, because learning the personality types and learning the sense of wounding that each type is creating a strategy around, right? Learning the needs of each type, the fears of each type, learning how each type fixates when they are in stress, and how each type feels in their emotional space when they're in stress, learning what each type looks like when they are in their kind of like highest self, their essence, right? That really helped me to trace the patterns of my behavior. And when you start tracing patterns, then you start noticing triggers. And when you start noticing triggers, you can start to remove the triggers. And when you start to remove the triggers, you can replace them with positive triggers. And the next thing you know, you've looked up in your home space, your work life, your social life, looks more like this harmonious ecosystem where everything is pouring into and nourishing itself, versus this very harmful ecosystem where your nutrients are being sapped at every level, and something is coming into something is coming into the ecosystem and benefiting from the nutrients but not putting anything back in. And
Yeah,
self-worth helps you to feel okay with stopping that sapping behavior.
absolutely. Well, I love that you're bringing it also back to Enneagram, because I'm taking a course with Danielle and learning so much. And I finally have figured out that I'm an Enneagram 1. I thought I was maybe a 3. And then I was like, no, I think I'm a 6. And now I'm like, oh, no, no, I'm definitely 1. And she is 2. And I'm curious, can you share a little bit about how that journey into understanding yourself through the Enneagram 1 helped you move into a place of greater self
Oh
worth?
my goodness. Yes. First of all, the essence of the type one, the when the type one feels rooted, rested, loved, and aligned, they embody a vision of perfection where they just discover how everything is working together. And that discovery of how everything is working together gives the type one this sense of serenity and calm confidence that even the hardest chapter is what's making the whole book a good book, right? And I've seen this in myself. One day, my husband and I had moved out of our house into a rental property in order to sell our house. And I got a call from him one day. I had just decided to take a day off, and I was pulling the covers up with my snacks laid out, and my movie was queued up to start. And he called and said, "You got to go to the other house." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because a realtor is there and says that the house has been flooded." And I said, "Okay." And I was able to immediately reason that this out of the blue, really um, tragic destruction of our property must mean that something good is on the other side of it, because I didn't leave the faucet running. I had not done anything to deserve, a flooded house. We had done everything that we possibly could to set this experience up for seamless success. And so I said, there must be something on the other side of this. So I put my Beyonce, the Homecoming album had just come out. So I put on that Homecoming album, and I got in that car and I bopped all the way over to that house. And when I got there, it was a mess. A realtor had left my pot filler, which is a faucet over the stove, had left it going for some days. And my house is a 3-story house. So the second floor with my custom bamboo hardwood floors and the first floor were completely soaked in water. And the story is very complex and beautiful, but make a long story short, we actually ended up receiving an insurance settlement that took care of all the damages. And while the contractors were fixing the damages, they were finding other things in the house to fix. And essentially, the flood ended up renovating the house. The deal fell through. We moved back in and we renovated the house for ourselves.
Amazing.
And so I
I
was
love
like,
that.
I knew it, you know. And so I've seen that perfection, that serenity, that vision of like, okay, hard parts bring us to the part of contention where the joy makes so much sense, right? In the end. And so I had seen that. And then I was able to trace the patterns of that. The type one has a felt sense of childhood wounding where they just never felt good enough. They always felt heavily criticized. And that is my childhood to a T. Born to young parents, raised by my older godparents, lived a very nomadic life, went to probably 3, 4 different houses a month because I was visiting my mom, visiting my dad, visiting my other family. Um, and constantly having to be responsible for my own things and my own self, and then know all the rules at each household. One house liked their cups upside down after they wash them. The other house liked them to be right side up. Another house didn't have a dishwasher at all. You know what I mean? And so it's like, okay, now I'm having to like learn and categorize what it means to be a good girl in all of these places. And then when I do mess up, when I do make a mistake, when I have a perfectly natural for my development childhood moment, I would feel like everybody was just coming down on me because I was the first grandchild. So nobody knew what they were doing in the 80s. They were like smoking cigarettes, like, you shouldn't be doing that. And I'm like, you're smoking a cigarette. Anyway, so that led me to have a lot of anger and resentment, right?
Mm.
And to do things spitefully on my own to compensate for the deep anger and resentment I had and the powerlessness I felt because all of these folks are adults. They're in control of me. I don't have a sense of personal power. And then finally, the points of growth and stress for the type one. Well, when type ones feel like they're making mistakes, they're not a good person, they're completely out of integrity, they move into this sad, withdrawn, pitiful space, right? And so I had that, I found myself going from angry to super, super sad and depressed, making myself wrong for that, and then cycling through anger and depression, resentment, right? So learning the character structure of the Enneagram type, I began to allow myself to go to that space, knowing that it was a temporary space. The growth point of the type one is to the spontaneous, joyful, fun loving type seven. And that's me on vacation. Like my husband always says, you're Mother Teresa at home and you are, you know, a comedian on vacation, right? And so I found myself noticing that I would be more spontaneous, joyful. My vacation style is different. My vacation voice is different, and I find myself tracing that pattern. So I created more vacation like moments in my normal life so that part of me could get some air and resurface. Um, so when I was able to trace those patterns, I was also able to slowly change my environment to meet the needs that I felt were going unmet for so long, to really see myself more in growth more often, right? More expansion more often. Then my Enneagram experience took me into this place of being really authentic and original and no longer needing the security of those patterns and being able to figure out what was right for me for the day or for the period or season of my life and unapologetically pursue that, knowing that it was all working perfectly in this big story. Right. And so then here comes that serenity I was telling you about earlier, where I have a calm confidence and even a psychic like intuition because now I'm more in touch with my body. I know what my gut is telling me. I honor my feelings. I trust my experience and the intellectual capacity of my experiences, right? I trust the information that I've learned and that I can recall my information at any point and integrate it and use it in application. And so I feel better about myself. I feel that I'm more worthy of the experiences and more deserving of the desires that I had been longing for. And then I found myself in positions where I could opt into those experiences and I could actualize those desires. And then here comes all of the things that I really wish for and long for as a kid, in my life. A happy, loving family where we really enjoy each other. A family vacation to Disneyland, which is something I would have never allowed myself as a pastor. Are you kidding me? People are struggling in this world. People are starving, and you're at Disneyland. Like, there's no way in the world I would have allowed that for myself back in those days. And so I went to Disneyland and I cried because the beauty. I mean, there are artists that are working in that park, and it inspired me in such a way that I went home and infused that artistic energy into my own industry. And it's just been really beautiful to see how when you allow yourself and you esteem yourself, then the world starts to reflect the overflow of how you feel about yourself, and people start to treat you in ways that are aligned with how you're treating yourself. So, my friends, my family, my husband, my daughter, a lot of us are, navigating more expensive ways to be in each other's lives. And it's because I set the tone for my own sense of self-worth, and then everybody else follows suit. And the folks who don't follow suit, it's an immediate deal breaker. So that's information about, who needs to be kind of farther out in those boundaries and who has the ability to be closer in.
Mm. Well, I love what you're saying about how when you esteem yourself and you have more worth, really what you're saying is you have more abundance in your life and
Yep.
more comes
Yep.
in,
Yep.
right? And sometimes I think people are like, oh, it's selfish. I'm like, it's not selfish because when you really have your own self worth, you start to see the world in a much more expansive way. And obviously, I'm a type one talking too.
Mm-hmm.
It's important, but it's actually important for me to have that perspective all the time. It's like, how do you ground yourself? And it comes from being grounded in who you are, in your self worth, and then you can see that
I
expansion.
mean, I got a grant to participate in. There's a arts organization in Houston called Project Row Houses, and they give grants to artists to turn these old, refurbished, dilapidated row houses. There are houses that are actually they're what's called shotgun houses because you can shoot a shotgun in through the front door and out of the back door. Well, these houses are actually renovated versions of the houses that the first ever emancipated Black folks lived in Houston, Texas. And so they've turned those houses into basically big canvases for artists to go and create an exhibition. And so I got my grant to do that, and I would say probably half of the money went on supplies and went on like installation. The other half, I contracted so many different people to play a part in the house, the programming, the installation, the design. I mean, I made $5,000 go so far, right? And so there is this other thing that happens is when you start to grow your self-worth and then the world begins to provide opportunities, you also confirm your self-worth in watching yourself positively steward your own opportunities. So I was like, oh, like, yeah. Like when I get it, I do give it. When I get opportunities, I steward those opportunities, and I really am leaving this earth better than I found it. Right? And so then you begin to not only esteem yourself and accept yourself and trust yourself, then you begin to love yourself. And when you begin to
Mhm.
love yourself, how you treat yourself becomes the standard for how you treat other people, and the energy, attention, and experiences that you create for other people is now the overflow of your own self-worth. So now you're esteeming everybody and teaching them how to upgrade their self-worth. Because when you treat other people well, it has an effect on them where it's like, I want to continue this by I want to chase this neurological cascade of dopamines and oxytocin that's flowing by continuing this treatment in my own life. Right. And so then you're, by just the very nature of your presence, you're making the world a better, more harmonious place.
So beautifully said. Thank you so much for that, Danielle. What would you say for someone who's starting on this journey? They're like at the beginning of it and they're really wanting to bring in a practice of self worth for themselves. What tip would you give for
I
them?
would say start with your crucial human needs and look up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That was a really good place for me to start. And if you look up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, um, the the first or the bottom rung of the pyramid is like physiological or like your basic needs, right? And so a good way to start is like, what are my basic needs? How do I need to sleep? How do I need to eat? What should I be drinking? Like, what kind of ways should I be nourishing my body with like hydration, right? Like, what physical things do I need to put on my body because of the climate that I live in? Where, like, look around at your home life. Is my home life, is my physical environment supporting my physiological needs, right? And once you start to begin to shift those things, the feeling that you get from taking care of yourself begins to overflow. And then here goes the next level, which is like safety. Like, how am I keeping my body and my person safe? Do I have safe people around me? Do I live in a safe area? Is my car safe? So then you start making changes, small changes within your current power and your current capacity. And every time you make a change that is positive, that energy will overflow into the next place of change that you see. And then you just go higher and higher up. Okay, now the next thing after physiological and safety is like love and belonging. So, do I have people in my life where our relationship is this mutual exchange of love and belonging? And if I do, how can I turn that up, dial that up? And if I notice that there are relationships that are not characterized by love and belonging, well, it's time to start shutting those down. So, how can I create distance and create space in my life for the relationships that I want, beginning with how I love and take care of myself, right? And then you go further up. Now we're at esteem, you know what I mean? Where you do things to build and boost your self confidence. I would say dig into the things that you did well as a kid. So for me, skating, dancing, reading, speaking, writing, like those are all things I've been doing since before I was, 10 years old. So return to those things that you like to do that bring you back to a sense of who you really are, who you were before a sense of wounding and a sense of panic begin to influence the decisions that we make, particularly social experiences. And then the top of the level is the top of the pyramid is self-actualization. And that is putting yourself in a position to actually learn how to do the thing that you feel like you were put on earth to do. Right. So and the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a beginning point, right? And then learn your Enneagram type, learn about your personality type, and the Enneagram is not the only typing system that's out there. And my teacher Claire says all models are incomplete and some are helpful for transformation. So find one that you like. I'm currently now in human design and gene keys. Like those are two new systems that are fascinating to me because they're so accurate and spot on. So I'm in that self actualization part where I'm just figuring out, more information about myself and how to leverage that information to determine what superpowers I can contribute in the world and how my talents and superpowers can go and protect me and go and prepare a space for me and can provide things for me, right? So I would say start with your crucial human needs and work your way up.
Beautiful. I mean, really, sometimes I think we underestimate how important those are. So I love that. All right. You might be sweating a little for this. Are you ready for the rapid fire questions?
Oh,
Okay.
yes, I'm ready.
Okay.
I trust myself. I trust myself.
You trust yourself. Yes, I love it. All right. What was the last thing you watched on TV?
The last thing I watched on TV was oh no. The last thing I watched on TV was the reboot of House Party, where these two guys threw a party in LeBron James's house. And it was so wildly impossible and just like the whole time I was like, this is not reality. Like this would not be happening. Like LeBron James ends up playing one-on-one with like, it's just, I was like, this would never happen. These people would be in jail from the moment they stepped on the property. Like, but it was just so fun to step into that realm of just like Hollywood, like so many holes, so many plot holes that once you get past a certain threshold of like, this would not happen, the movie just is fun. It's just like a theme park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. Okay.
I wish it was something smarter though, like, oh, I watched a collection of Toni Morrison interviews, which I do watch, but that wasn't the last. My Toni
That
Morrison
wasn't
interviews
last
were
night.
not
That
the
wasn't the
last
last
thing.
night. All right. What's on your nightstand?
What is on my nightstand is a essential oil diffuser, a salt lamp, a note that my daughter has given me that says I'm the best mom ever. Um, I'm looking at it because I work in one part of my room and then I sleep in another part. Um, a, a surprise Valentine's Day for my husband, um, and a electric candle warmer, and an owl that I got from Oaxaca, a hand carved owl from a Oaxacan artisan in Mexico, and then some luxurious body lotion from Lush. And then because I haven't taken it today, it's some echinacea pills that a naturopathic pharmacist made for me. So that sounds like a lot, but it's not as cluttered as you think.
I love it. Those are all fun things. I like knowing what people are on people's nightstands.
Yeah. Oh, and my phone charger is somewhere around there, but I try to keep my phone
A little farther
farther away.
away. All right. Well, when's the last time you tried something new and what was it?
Ooh, I went to a new restaurant in Houston called the Ginger Mule on Saturday. And it was a restaurant soft opening. And when I tell you, I went to go in the kitchen and tongue kiss everybody who had made my food, just
You're
like a deep,
that good?
like a French kiss, you know? It was so good. And it was a vegan, gluten-free restaurant. And I have
Oh,
a wheat
wow.
allergy.
Oh. Well, next time I'm in Houston, I'll be like, you got to take me to
Oh, I
that
will
place,
take you to the
Danielle.
Ginger Mule and we will order all the things. I'm going to be like, don't
Okay.
even worry about it. Let's just get everything because everything is
Getting
good.
everything. I love it. Okay. Last question. What are your top three most used emojis on your phone?
um, let's look. I'm gonna pull up. Okay, so let's go to emojis. Frequently used: the crying, laughing emoji, the big eyes
It's a
looking to the
fun.
left,
Oh, yeah.
and um, the the brown thumbs up.
The brown thumbs up.
Hmm.
Nice. Amazing. Well, Danielle, thank you so much for being on. Where can people find you to find out more about what you do and what you're up to?
Yeah. So I have a little website. It's called confusion2clarity.life. So you go to www.confusion2clarity, all spelled correctly, .life, Life, like the life you want to live. And there you will be able to catch a lot of my offerings. I have a store where you can go in and if you want a little dip your little pinky toe into the Enneagram, there's a workbook that I created that is the workbook I wish that I had when I was kind of stumbling through my own Enneagram journey. Um, I also am a professional coaching consultant and I teach integrated well being. And that is basically my way of guiding people through ways to both intellectually understand something, emotionally connect to it, and then integrate what they understand, what they emotionally feel, and what they intuit from their gut intuition space into a personal and professional culture that sets them up for whatever their version of success looks like. So you can find that there. I also teach an empathy driven approach to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and ways that we can expand our empathy to go from being aware of what people are experiencing, especially those who are a part of the historically excluded global majority, developing empathy for folks that we don't normally have empathy for, who don't look like us or who with whom we don't normally identify, and then identifying what acts of compassion we can begin to leverage. And then lastly, how can we value and appreciate folks from different cultures and folks who have like invaluable contributions to make. So all of that's there. And I also love when I hear from clients that are like, I love everything you're doing, but I have a unique request and we co-create ways to. So I show up and teach boards and churches and tech companies and law firms. And I always say I have my tech clients, and then I taught NASA a lot last year, and so we go from like cyberspace to outer space, you know. And so the curriculum is really industry agnostic, meaning that empathy can be really plugged in anywhere. Compassion can be plugged in anywhere. And appreciation, esteeming and valuing others as worthy can really be plugged into any industry. And as we're seeing, we shall need it.
Well, Danielle, I love being around you and in your space, and I'm cannot recommend her more. I'm in her certification
Thank
for
you for
Enneagram
saying that.
training, and she's just a beautiful soul, and she's out doing really big things in the world. So make sure you check it. We'll be linking all that stuff in the show notes as well. And I am just so grateful to be in your sphere and in your world. And thank you so much for being on School of Self Worth.
Thank you for having School of Self Worth. And Nicole, I just want to echo back to you how being connected to you in the various ways has just continued to expand me. So when I do my little Maslow's hierarchy of needs and I look at my community of loving and belonging, I can check off that our relationship is one that is expanding me in every way that we choose to engage in. So thank you for being an expansive person and helping me to not only know my worth, but expand my offerings to command what I am worthy of. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Danielle.
This was fun. Thank you.